My name is Lila Morgan. I was 60 years old when a seemingly routine medical procedure turned into the most transformative experience of my life. I had been living what many would call an idyllic life, married to my husband Tom for 30 years, raising 3 wonderful children, and residing in a charming home surrounded by all the comforts one might expect. Yet beneath the surface of this picturesque existence, I had been drifting through life, disconnected from the deeper sense of purpose I once thought I understood. My upbringing had been rooted in faith, attending church services during holidays and absorbing the teachings that were central to my family's life. However, as I grew older and stepped into the bustling demands of adulthood, juggling work, raising children, and managing the day-to-day challenges of life, my connection to spirituality began to fade. It wasn't an intentional abandonment, but rather a quiet erosion, as the busyness of life drowned out the still, small voice within me. This all changed one day when I underwent what was supposed to be a straightforward gallbladder surgery. The doctor had assured me it was a simple procedure, and I approached it with a mix of nervous anticipation and relief. I was eager to rid myself of the discomfort that had been plaguing me for weeks. The surgery itself seemed to go well, and I returned home sore but optimistic about my recovery. A few days later, I began to feel unwell. It started subtly, a nagging feeling I couldn't quite place, a sense of unease that seemed to grow with each passing hour. Soon, hives appeared on my skin, an allergic reaction unlike anything I had experienced before. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it would pass. But then my throat began to tighten, my breathing became labored, and a wave of panic overtook me. My heart raced, pounding as though it might burst from my chest. I managed to choke out the words, "Call 911, before the darkness swallowed me. Tom later told me that the paramedics arrived quickly, working frantically to stabilize me. I was rushed to the hospital, but by the time we arrived, my heart had stopped. That was the moment when my life, at least, my life as I had known it, came to an end. I remember the transition vividly. One moment, I was trapped in a body that refused to cooperate, overwhelmed by fear and confusion. The next, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from me. It was as though I had awakened from a nightmare to find myself enveloped in warmth and calm. I was no longer bound by the limitations of my physical form. Instead, I was floating, weightless and free, observing the chaos below me as though it were a scene from a distant movie. From my vantage point above the hospital room, I saw the doctors and nurses working with urgent precision, their faces etched with concentration. I could see my husband pacing anxiously in the hallway, his hands clenched and his expression a mixture of fear and helplessness. Despite the intensity of the scene, I felt utterly detached, as though I were merely a spectator. The emotions that had gripped me moments earlier, the fear, the pain, the panic, were gone, replaced by an all-encompassing tranquility. Then, without warning, I was pulled away from the hospital room. It wasn't a physical movement, but more like an unseen force gently guiding me. The scene dissolved around me, replaced by a realm of light. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen, not harsh or blinding, but soft and radiant, emanating a warmth that seemed to permeate my very being. It was everywhere and nowhere at once, a presence that enveloped me completely. In this place, I felt a love so profound it defies description. It wasn't just an emotion, it was a state of being. A love that seemed to infuse every particle of existence. Every worry, every regret, every ounce of pain I had ever carried was washed away, leaving only a sense of belonging and peace. I felt whole in a way I never had before, as though I had finally come home. As I stood in the light, I became aware of a figure approaching me. He didn't look like the depictions I had seen in paintings or statues, but I knew immediately who he was. It was Jesus. His presence was both overwhelming and comforting, radiating a combination of compassion and strength that seemed to resonate through the very fabric of the light. His eyes, more than anything else, captured me. They held a depth of wisdom and love that felt infinite. Yet within them was also a seriousness, a weight that spoke to the importance of this moment. He didn't speak in words, at least not as we understand them. Instead, his voice resonated within me, a whisper that bypassed language and reached directly into my heart. "It is not your time yet," he said, though the words were less spoken and more felt. "But there is something you must know, and something you must share." A part of me longed to stay in his presence, to remain in this place of love and light forever. But his words carried a weight of purpose, and I knew I couldn't ignore them. When he extended his hand, inviting me to follow, I felt an undeniable pull to move forward. As I took his hand, an indescribable warmth enveloped me, and we began to move together, gliding through the expanse of light. Our journey led us to places I could never have imagined. The first was a realm of darkness, a stark contrast to the light we had just left. The air felt heavy, filled with cries of anguish and despair. I trembled at the sight, unable to comprehend the suffering I was witnessing. "Why are we here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You need to understand the consequences of turning away from love," Jesus replied, his voice filled with compassion. I watched as souls writhed in torment, their faces etched with regret. It wasn't just physical pain, it was the anguish of separation, of having chosen a path away from light and love. The scene was seared into my memory, a reminder of the gravity of our choices. Then, just as suddenly, the darkness lifted, replaced by a realm of indescribable beauty. Colors more vibrant than anything on earth surrounded me, cascading through gardens and rivers that seemed alive with energy. Angels sang in perfect harmony, their melodies resonating with the love that permeated this place. "This is where your spirit belongs," Jesus said. "This is what awaits those who choose love and truth." I felt an overwhelming longing to stay. But Jesus' mission for me wasn't complete. He guided me further, to a place where I would witness truths that would forever change my understanding of the world. Though I didn't yet fully grasp what lay ahead, I felt an unshakable sense of purpose, a calling to bring what I was about to learn back to the life I had left behind. As Jesus led me forward through the realm of light, I felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation mixed with an underlying calm. The beauty of heaven still lingered in my heart, but I knew that my journey was far from over. We glided effortlessly, the warmth of his presence enveloping me like a shield of peace. I knew instinctively that whatever lay ahead would not only challenge me but also deepen my understanding of life's purpose. The light around us began to shift, softening and fading into a more neutral glow. I sensed that we were approaching another realm, one that felt both connected to the world I had known and yet entirely separate. As we came to a stop, the scene before me materialized with astonishing clarity. I was no longer in the boundless expanse of light but in a setting that resembled Earth. A bustling city filled with people going about their daily lives. The atmosphere seemed normal at first glance, but as I observed more closely, I noticed something unsettling. There was a strange energy in the air, a mixture of excitement and unease. Crowds gathered in public squares, their faces lit with a fervent admiration as they cheered for a man standing at the center of it all. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention with every movement and word. Though I didn't recognize him, I could feel the power he wielded over those around him. "What is this?" I asked, turning to Jesus. "This is what you must see," he replied, his voice filled with both urgency and sorrow. "This man is the Antichrist." The weight of his words struck me like a thunderbolt. The term was familiar, one I had heard in religious contexts before, but seeing it unfold before my eyes gave it a gravity I had never comprehended. I focused on the man, trying to reconcile his outward appearance with the darkness I felt radiating beneath the surface. He was charismatic in a way that felt almost supernatural. His smile seemed to light up the faces of those around him, and his voice carried a soothing yet commanding tone that captivated the crowds. He spoke of hope, unity, and a brighter future, offering solutions to the world's problems that seemed both practical and visionary. The people responded with an almost hypnotic devotion, their cheers echoing through the city. Yet beneath the surface of his words, I felt a dissonance, a subtle but chilling undercurrent that betrayed his true intentions. The energy surrounding him was not one of love and truth but of manipulation and control. It was as though his words were laced with invisible chains, binding those who listened to him in ways they didn't fully understand. As I watched, the vision shifted, showing me scenes from different parts of the world. In each place, this man's influence grew stronger. Leaders from various nations gathered around him, drawn by his promises of peace and prosperity. He orchestrated deals and alliances with a skill that seemed almost otherworldly, bringing together groups that had been at odds for generations. To the outside world, he appeared to be a savior, a beacon of hope in a time of chaos. But as Jesus allowed me to see deeper, I recognized the darkness that lay at the heart of his rise to power. Behind the charm and the rhetoric was a sinister agenda, one designed not to heal the world but to control it. I saw shadowy figures working behind the scenes, pulling strings and ensuring that his ascent served their purposes. These figures were faceless, their energy cold and calculating, driven by motives that went beyond human greed or ambition. The vision shifted again, and I saw the man addressing a massive crowd. His words were filled with promises, an end to poverty, a solution to hunger, and a new era of peace. The people listened with rapt attention, their faces alight with hope. Yet as I looked closer, I noticed something disturbing. In the fringes of the crowd, those who did not cheer, who questioned or doubted, began to fade from view. They were silenced, their voices drowned out by the overwhelming adoration of the masses. I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy with what I was witnessing. Why can't they see the truth? I asked. Why are they so blinded by his words? Fear and longing. He replied, the world will be in turmoil, wars, natural disasters, economic collapse. In their desperation, people will seek a savior, someone who promises to restore order and bring peace. But this peace will be false, and the cost will be great. His words pierced me, and I felt the gravity of the situation settle in my heart. The vision shifted once more, showing me the technological advances this man would use to consolidate his power. I saw systems of control implemented under the guise of progress, methods of monitoring, regulating, and distributing resources that appeared benevolent on the surface but were designed to enslave. Those who resisted were branded as traitors, their dissent used as justification for tighter controls. The scene then focused on the Middle East, a region long plagued by conflict. I saw this man at the center of negotiations, brokering deals that seemed to promise peace. I witnessed the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, a moment that filled the world with awe and hope. Yet even this act, steeped in prophecy and significance, carried a hidden agenda. It was a step in his plan to consolidate power and deceive the masses. As I absorbed all of this, Jesus' voice broke through the heaviness of the vision. This is why you must return. He said, the world must be warned. My children must be vigilant, grounded in love and truth, so they are not deceived. I felt an urgency in his words, a call to action that left no room for hesitation. The weight of what I had seen was overwhelming, but I also felt a strength rising within me, a strength that came from the love and peace radiating from Jesus. His presence was a reminder that even in the face of such darkness, there was hope. The vision shifted one final time, showing me a multitude of people. They stood in different places, some in cities, others in rural areas, but they all shared a common longing. I could feel their hunger for truth, their yearning for something real amidst the chaos and deception. Jesus turned to me and said, these are the ones searching for light. You must help them understand that the way to peace is through love and truth. His words filled me with a profound sense of purpose. Though I still longed to remain in his presence, I understood that my journey wasn't about staying in the light. It was about bringing that light back to the world. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt his love and reassurance flow through me. You are not alone, he said. I will guide you. In that moment, I felt ready, not because I was fearless, but because I was grounded in his love. As the vision faded, I sensed the beginning of my return to the physical world. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I knew that the truth I carried would serve as a beacon, guiding me and those I encountered toward the light. As the visions faded and the radiant presence of Jesus began to dissolve, I felt a pull, a gentle but insistent force drawing me back toward my physical body. The peace and love that had surrounded me in the light lingered, wrapping around me like a protective cloak. Yet there was a growing awareness that my time in this realm was ending, and the mission I had been given was about to begin. The transition was not seamless. There was a sharp jolt as I was thrust back into the limitations of my physical form. The sensations of pain, cold, and weight returned all at once, contrasting starkly with the freedom and serenity I had just experienced. My body felt foreign, heavy, as if I were wearing an ill-fitting garment. The bright lights of the hospital room and the hum of machines came into focus, grounding me in the reality I had left behind. I opened my eyes to see Tom, my husband, standing at my bedside. His face was etched with worry. But when he saw me stir, relief flooded his expression. Tears welled in his eyes as he reached for my hand, gripping it tightly, as if to anchor me to the world. "You're back," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. I wanted to speak, to reassure him, to tell him everything I had seen. But the words wouldn't come. My throat was dry, and my mind was still reeling from the intensity of what I had just experienced. Instead, I squeezed his hand, letting him know I was present, even if I couldn't yet explain what had happened. Over the next few days, as my physical strength slowly returned, I began to process the enormity of what I had witnessed. The visions of light, the warnings of darkness, and the call to action from Jesus played over and over in my mind. Each detail seared into my memory with vivid clarity. I knew that I had been entrusted with something profoundly important, a message not just for me, but for the world. Yet sharing that message was not as straightforward as I had hoped. When I first tried to explain my experience to Tom, his reaction was a mix of awe and skepticism. He listened intently as I described the overwhelming love I had felt in the presence of Jesus, the harrowing vision of the Antichrist, and the urgency of the mission I had been given. But I could see the questions in his eyes, the struggle to reconcile my words with the reality he understood. "I believe you," he said finally, his voice soft. "But it's a lot to take in." I couldn't blame him. Even I struggled to fully grasp the magnitude of what I had experienced. How could I expect others to understand when I was still finding the words to describe it myself? Despite this, I felt a deep conviction that I had to try. The message wasn't mine to keep, it was meant to be shared. No matter how difficult the process. I started small, confiding in close family members and friends. Their reactions varied. Some were moved, their eyes welling with tears as they listened. Others were hesitant, their questions revealing a desire to believe but also a fear of the unknown. A few dismissed my story outright, attributing it to a vivid hallucination or the effects of the trauma I had endured. While the skepticism stung, it didn't deter me. I had been given a glimpse of something far greater than myself. And the truth of it resonated so deeply within me that no amount of doubt from others could shake it. Still, I realized that I needed to approach the task of sharing my experience with patience and humility. It wasn't about convincing anyone, it was about planting seeds of understanding and letting them grow in their own time. One night, as I sat in the quiet of my living room, I felt a sudden urge to write. Grabbing a notebook, I began to pour out everything I had seen, felt, and learned during my time beyond. The words flowed effortlessly, as if they were being guided by a force greater than myself. Page after page filled with vivid descriptions of the light, the warnings of darkness, and the profound love I had encountered in the presence of Jesus. Writing became a form of catharsis, helping me to process the emotions and insights that had been swirling within me since my return. It also became a way to share my story more clearly, allowing me to articulate the details in a way that others could connect with. When I showed the notebook to Tom, he read it carefully, his expression shifting from skepticism to a quiet reverence. "This is powerful," he said, placing the notebook gently on the table. "You need to share this with more people." Encouraged by his support, I began to look for ways to broaden the reach of my message. I started by speaking to small groups at my church, sharing my experience in the hopes that it would inspire others to reflect on their own lives and spiritual journeys. To my surprise, these sessions often sparked deep and meaningful conversations. People opened up about their fears, their struggles with faith, and their longing for a sense of purpose. Through these discussions, I realized that my experience was not just a revelation, it was a bridge. It connected me to others in a way I had never known before, breaking down barriers and creating a space where vulnerability and authenticity could flourish. The love I had felt in the light became a guiding force, shaping the way I interacted with those around me. But the mission was not without challenges. As I delved deeper into sharing my story, I encountered resistance, not just from others, but from within myself. Doubts crept in, whispering questions that I couldn't always answer. What if I wasn't strong enough for this task? What if my words fell on deaf ears? What if I misunderstood the purpose of my experience? In those moments of uncertainty, I turned to the presence of Jesus that still lingered within me. Though I could no longer see him, I felt his guidance in subtle but unmistakable ways, a sense of peace when I needed it most. A quiet reassurance that I was on the right path. His words echoed in my heart, "You are not alone. I will guide you." With each step forward, the doubts grew quieter, replaced by a growing confidence in the truth of what I had seen. I began to embrace the mission not as a burden, but as a gift, a chance to bring light to a world often overshadowed by fear and confusion. As my physical recovery progressed, so did my spiritual journey. I started volunteering with local charities, finding joy in acts of service that brought hope to those in need. Whether it was delivering meals to struggling families or offering a listening ear to someone in crisis, I saw each interaction as an opportunity to embody the love I had experienced in the light. The vision of the Antichrist remained vivid in my mind, a constant reminder of the urgency of my mission. I spoke openly about the importance of discernment, urging others to look beyond appearances and seek the truth in their own hearts. Though the darkness I had witnessed was sobering, it was the love and hope of Jesus that I carried most strongly. It was a beacon, guiding me and those around me toward a deeper understanding of what it means to live in connection with love and truth. The journey back to life was not easy, but it was filled with purpose. Each day brought new challenges and new opportunities to share the message I had been entrusted with. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I walked it with the knowledge that I was not alone, that the love and light of Jesus were with me every step of the way. As the weeks turned into months, I began to find my footing in a life that felt simultaneously familiar and entirely new. The world around me was the same, but my perception of it had shifted profoundly. Every interaction, every moment, seemed imbued with a deeper significance. The visions I had been shown, the love I had experienced, and the warnings I had received continued to shape my actions and thoughts. One of the most profound changes was the way I related to people. Before my near-death experience, I had often moved through life with a certain detachment, preoccupied with the daily grind and the small inconveniences that seemed so important at the time. Now, I found myself acutely aware of the connections that bind us all together. Each person I encountered carried their own burdens, joys, and struggles, and I felt an overwhelming compassion for them. I began to see every conversation as an opportunity to connect on a deeper level. When someone shared their worries or frustrations, I listened with a patience and openness I hadn't possessed before. I wasn't there to offer solutions or fix their problems, most of the time. That wasn't what they needed. What they needed, I realized, was to be seen, heard, and valued. And in those moments of genuine connection, I felt the presence of the light I had experienced, as if it were flowing through me and touching them in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. One of the most memorable encounters during this time happened in a place I wouldn't have expected, the grocery store. I was standing in line at the checkout, lost in thought about the week ahead, when I noticed the woman in front of me. She looked tired, her shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. As she placed her items on the conveyor belt, she fumbled with her wallet, her hands trembling slightly. Without thinking, I stepped forward and gently asked, "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears she was trying to hold back. "It's been a hard day," she admitted quietly. I didn't press her for details. Instead, I offered her a kind smile and said, "It's okay to have hard days. You're doing the best you can." Her expression softened, and for a moment, the heaviness in her eyes lifted. She nodded, whispered, "Thank you," and finished her transaction. It was a small exchange, lasting no more than a minute, but I could feel the ripple it created. It reminded me that even the simplest acts of kindness have the power to shift someone's day, perhaps even their life. These moments became a regular part of my days, brief but meaningful connections that left both me and the other person feeling a little more seen and a little less alone. Each one reinforced the lesson I had learned during my time beyond, that love is the most powerful force we have. And it is expressed most profoundly in the smallest, simplest acts. My family, too, began to notice the changes in me. I was more present, more patient, and more willing to let go of old grievances that had once seemed so important. With Tom, I found myself cherishing even the mundane moments we shared, cooking dinner together, watching the evening news, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. The love between us felt deeper and more sacred, as though it had been strengthened by the trials we had faced and the truths I had come to understand. My children, now grown and busy with their own lives, also felt the difference. During a visit from my eldest daughter, Emily, she said something that stayed with me. "Mom, you seem lighter," she observed, "like you're carrying less weight than before." Her words struck a chord. She was right. I was carrying less weight. The fears and worries that had once consumed me no longer held the same power. I still faced challenges, of course, but I approached them with a sense of trust and surrender that I hadn't known before. The love I had experienced in the light had shown me that I wasn't alone. And that reassurance gave me the strength to face life's uncertainties with courage and grace. As my relationships deepened, so did my involvement in the community. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping families who were struggling to make ends meet. The work was humbling and often heartbreaking, but it was also profoundly rewarding. Each time I handed a meal to someone in need or listened to their story, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond words. It wasn't about fixing their problems or offering solutions, it was about being present, holding space for their humanity, and reminding them, even in small ways, that they were loved. One evening, as I was leaving the shelter, I was approached by a young woman named Sarah. She had been staying there with her 2 children after fleeing an abusive relationship. Over the past few weeks, we had exchanged small pleasantries, but this was the first time she had sought me out for a deeper conversation. "I just wanted to say thank you," she began, her voice hesitant, "not just for the meals, but for the way you make us feel like we matter." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "You do matter," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "More than you know." In that moment, I realized that the work I was doing wasn't just about helping others. It was about reflecting the love I had experienced during my near-death experience. The love that had shown me the infinite value of every soul. It was a love that didn't judge, didn't ask for anything in return, and didn't diminish in the face of hardship. It simply existed, boundless and eternal. As I continued to share my story, both in formal settings like church groups and in informal conversations with friends and neighbors, I found that people were hungry for connection. They wanted to understand the deeper truths of life, to find meaning in their struggles, and to feel that they were part of something greater. My role wasn't to provide answers or solutions, it was to offer a perspective, to share what I had seen and felt, and to encourage them to seek their own connection to the light. The vision of the Antichrist, though sobering, remained an integral part of my message. I spoke of the importance of discernment, of looking beyond appearances and seeking truth in a world that often values charisma over character. But I also emphasized the hope and love that had been the foundation of my experience. Even in the face of darkness, I had seen the light, and I knew it was stronger than anything that sought to overshadow it. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I found myself settling into this new rhythm of life. It wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt, fatigue, and frustration, but each obstacle became an opportunity to practice the lessons I had learned, to approach each moment with love, to seek connection rather than division, and to trust that the light within me was enough to guide the way. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't need to. What I had was a profound sense of purpose, a deep well of love to draw from, and the knowledge that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that stretched far beyond what I could see. With every step I took, I felt the presence of the light beings who had guided me, their love and wisdom a constant reminder that I was never truly alone. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to continue. One step, one connection, one act of love at a time. As I moved further into this transformed life, I began to feel the weight of the truths I had been shown during my near-death experience. The vision of the Antichrist, his deceptive rise to power, and the ensuing chaos were not mere warnings, they were a call to action. While the love and light I had experienced in the presence of Jesus sustained me, the urgency of the message he had entrusted to me became increasingly clear. The challenge was not just to share what I had seen but to do so in a way that inspired others to reflect and prepare without succumbing to fear. Fear, after all, was one of the tools of deception I had witnessed in the vision. It was a potent force that could cloud judgment, isolate people, and make them vulnerable to false promises. I knew that my task was to point people toward hope, faith, and discernment, to empower them rather than overwhelm them. One of the first steps I took was to gather those closest to me, my family and a few trusted friends, for a conversation about what I had experienced. Sitting in my living room, surrounded by familiar faces, I shared the vision in as much detail as I could. I described the charismatic figure who rose to power, the way he manipulated fear and confusion to gain control, and the shadowy forces behind him that sought to undermine truth and love. The room was silent as I spoke. When I finished, Tom was the first to respond. "It's a lot to take in," he admitted, his voice steady but thoughtful. "But I believe you, Lila. I can see it in your eyes. This isn't just a story to you. It's something you lived." Others nodded, their expressions a mix of awe and contemplation. One of my friends, a deeply pragmatic woman named Carol, asked, "What do you think we're supposed to do with this? How do we prepare for something like that?" Her question was one I had wrestled with myself. The answer that came to me wasn't complicated, but it was profound. "We prepare by staying grounded in love," I said, "by seeking truth, even when it's uncomfortable, and by staying connected to one another." The vision wasn't just about warning us of what's coming, it was about reminding us of what truly matters. The conversations that followed were some of the most honest and vulnerable I had ever experienced. We talked about the challenges of discernment in a world filled with distractions, the importance of building communities rooted in compassion, and the need to nurture a sense of spiritual awareness. It became clear to me that sharing my story wasn't just about delivering a message. It was about creating spaces where people could explore their own questions and truths. As word of my experience spread, I began to receive invitations to speak at small gatherings, church groups, community centers, and even private homes. At first, I was hesitant. Standing in front of a crowd, no matter how small, wasn't something I had ever been comfortable with. But each time I felt the fear rise, I remembered Jesus' words, "You are not alone. I will guide you." And so, I stepped forward, trusting that the light within me would shine through. These gatherings were deeply moving. People of all ages and backgrounds came, drawn by a shared desire to understand the deeper truths of life. Some came out of curiosity, others out of a longing for hope in uncertain times. As I shared my story, I emphasized not just the warnings but also the profound love and peace I had experienced in the light. It was this love, I explained, that had the power to guide us through any darkness. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, a young man approached me. He introduced himself as David and explained that he had been struggling with a deep sense of disillusionment. "I've been looking for something real," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something to hold on to. Listening to you tonight, it felt like a piece of that." His words humbled me. I wasn't a teacher or a prophet. I was simply a woman who had been given a glimpse of something extraordinary. Yet hearing how my story had touched someone reminded me of the ripple effect of love and truth. Each person who heard the message and carried it forward became part of a larger web of connection, spreading light in ways I might never see. As these connections grew, so did my understanding of the vision I had been shown. It wasn't just about the Antichrist or the external challenges the world would face. It was about the internal battles each of us would have to confront, the temptations to turn away from love, the allure of easy answers, and the fear that can lead us astray. The vision was a reminder that the choices we make, no matter how small, are part of a larger tapestry. This realization deepened my commitment to living the truths I had seen. I began to integrate small, intentional acts of love and kindness into my daily life, writing notes of encouragement to friends, volunteering at local shelters, and simply taking the time to listen when someone needed to talk. Each act felt like a thread in the fabric of connection, a way of strengthening the web of light that binds us all. But the journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt when I questioned whether I was strong enough for the task I had been given. There were times when the skepticism of others stung, making me wonder if my efforts were making any difference. In those moments, I turned inward, seeking the presence of the light beings who had guided me. Though I could no longer see them, I felt their energy. a quiet reassurance that I was on the right path. One particularly difficult day, I found myself back at the park where I had first begun to process my experience. Sitting beneath a towering oak tree, I closed my eyes and let the sounds of nature wash over me. The rustling leaves, the chirping of birds, and the distant laughter of children reminded me of the beauty and simplicity of life. In that stillness, I felt the presence of Jesus, not in words or visions, but in the quiet peace that settled over me. You are enough. The thought came, clear and undeniable. What you do, no matter how small, is part of something greater. Those words became a touchstone for me, a reminder that the mission I had been given wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It was about living each moment with love, intention, and integrity. It was about trusting that even the smallest acts could create ripples of light in a world that desperately needed it. As I left the park that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of the vision hadn't lessened, but I no longer saw it as a burden. Instead, it was a gift, a chance to bring hope, connection, and love to those around me. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to continue. One step, one conversation, and one act of kindness at a time. In the months that followed, the mission I had been entrusted with began to take on a life of its own. The more I shared my experience, the more I saw the ripple effect of love and truth in the lives of those I encountered. It was humbling to witness how a simple conversation, a story shared, or a moment of connection could ignite something profound in another person. The light I had experienced beyond the physical world was not just a memory, it was a living force, moving through me and into the lives of others. One of the most striking aspects of this journey was the way people opened their hearts once they felt truly seen and heard. At first, many came to me with curiosity, eager to hear about my near-death experience and the visions I had witnessed. But as we talked, their own stories and struggles began to surface. I realized that my role wasn't just to share what I had seen. It was to create a space where others could explore their own truths, ask their own questions, and reconnect with the light within themselves. One evening, I was invited to speak at a small community gathering. The group was a mix of ages and backgrounds, young parents, retirees, college students, and even a few teenagers who had come out of curiosity. As I began to recount my journey, I felt the familiar weight of responsibility balanced by the reassurance of Jesus' presence. His words echoed in my heart, "You are not alone. I will guide you." I spoke about the overwhelming love I had felt in the presence of Jesus, the vision of the Antichrist, and the urgent call to live with discernment, love, and truth. As I looked around the room, I could see the emotions playing out on people's faces: wonder, fear, hope, and a longing to understand. When I finished, there was a long silence before a woman in her 50s raised her hand. "I've been struggling to make sense of everything going on in the world," she said, her voice tinged with weariness. "The division, the fear, the uncertainty, it feels overwhelming. How do we stay grounded when it seems like everything is falling apart?" Her question struck at the heart of what so many people were feeling. And I paused to let her words settle. "We stay grounded by remembering what truly matters," I said finally. "Love, connection, and truth. The world can be chaotic, but the light within us is constant. When we choose to act with love, even in small ways, we push back against the darkness." The conversation that followed was rich and heartfelt. People shared their fears, their hopes, and their experiences of trying to navigate a world that often felt confusing and fragmented. We talked about the importance of community, of supporting one another through challenges, and of seeking discernment in a time when deception seemed to be everywhere. By the end of the evening, there was a palpable sense of unity in the room, a reminder that we are never truly alone in our struggles. These gatherings became a regular part of my life, each one a unique opportunity to connect with others and share the light I had been shown. Some were held in church basements, others in living rooms or community centers. No matter the setting, the conversations always carried a common thread: a longing for truth, a hunger for connection, and a hope that transcended the challenges of the moment. One particularly memorable gathering took place in the home of a young couple who had invited their neighbors to join us. As we sat in their cozy living room, a man in his 30s spoke up. His name was James, and he shared that he had recently lost his job and was struggling to support his family. "I've been feeling like I failed," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Hearing your story, it makes me wonder if there's more I should be doing. If I've been missing something important." His vulnerability opened the door for others to share their own struggles. And what unfolded was a conversation filled with empathy, encouragement, and shared wisdom. I reminded James that his worth wasn't tied to his circumstances and that even in times of hardship, his choices to love and care for his family were acts of profound significance. "Your struggles don't define you," I said. "It's how you choose to move through them, with love, resilience, and faith, that matters." By the end of the evening, James looked lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. His story stayed with me, a reminder of the quiet strength that lies within each of us and the power of community to help us rediscover it. While these gatherings were a source of inspiration and connection, they also deepened my understanding of the vision I had been shown. The Antichrist's rise was not just about global events. It was a reflection of the choices humanity makes every day. The allure of easy answers, the temptation to place our trust in charismatic leaders, and the willingness to sacrifice truth for convenience were all part of the deception I had witnessed. The challenge, I realized, was to cultivate a collective awareness that could counter these tendencies. This awareness began to take shape in unexpected ways. People who had attended my talks started forming their own groups, gathering to discuss how they could live more intentionally and support one another. Acts of kindness and service multiplied, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers reaching out to offer support, and communities coming together to address local needs. One such initiative was a neighborhood food drive organized by a woman named Linda, who had been deeply moved by my story. What began as a simple effort to collect canned goods turned into a monthly event that brought the community together. Volunteers of all ages worked side by side, not only distributing food but also creating a space where people could connect, share their stories, and support one another. Linda later told me, "I never imagined something so small could make such a difference. It's like the love we put into this keeps growing and spreading." Her words mirrored what I had come to believe, that love, when shared, multiplies. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, contributes to the greater web of connection that binds us all. As the ripple effects of these efforts continued to grow, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The challenges I had witnessed in my vision were daunting, but they were not insurmountable. The light I had experienced was not just a memory, it was a force that could be cultivated and shared. One moment, one act, one connection at a time. Even in moments of doubt or fatigue, I reminded myself of the love and peace I had felt in the presence of Jesus. His guidance, though subtle, remained a constant presence in my life, urging me to trust the process and continue walking the path I had been shown. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer daunted by the road ahead. Each step forward was a testament to the power of love and connection. A reminder that even in the face of darkness, the light within us is strong enough to guide the way. Together, we were building something greater than ourselves, a tapestry of hope, resilience, and truth that would endure for generations to come. The journey of sharing my experience continued to evolve, weaving its way into every aspect of my life. The more I spoke to others about the love, light, and warnings I had been shown, the clearer it became that the message wasn't just about events or visions. It was about the condition of the human heart, how easily we can be swayed by fear, deception, or apathy, and how vital it is to stay rooted in love, truth, and discernment. One of the most poignant lessons I learned during this time was the power of preparation, not in the sense of stockpiling supplies or anticipating specific events, but in preparing hearts and minds to navigate the challenges of life with clarity and faith. The vision of the Antichrist had shown me how easily people could be led astray when they were disconnected from their inner light and from each other. My mission, I realized, was not only to share what I had seen but to help others cultivate the resilience and awareness needed to stand firm in truth. I began to focus more deeply on creating spaces where people could explore these ideas together. Whether it was a church gathering, a community meeting, or a casual conversation over coffee, my goal was to encourage reflection and dialogue. These spaces became sanctuaries of honesty and connection, where people felt safe to share their fears, questions, and hopes. One evening, I hosted a small group discussion at my home. We gathered around the dining room table, the warm glow of candles creating a sense of intimacy. The topic for the evening was living with discernment, and I started by sharing a simple truth I had come to understand. That discernment begins with knowing yourself, your values, your fears, and the light that resides within you. As we went around the table, each person shared their thoughts and experiences. A young mother named Rachel spoke about the challenges of raising children in a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain. "I want to teach my kids to be kind and strong," she said, "but sometimes I wonder if it's enough. How do I help them see what's real when there's so much noise and confusion?" Her question struck a chord with everyone in the room. We talked about the importance of modeling love and authenticity in our own lives, of creating environments where children could feel safe to ask questions and express their thoughts. I shared how my experience had taught me that the simplest acts of love, listening, encouraging, and being present, could have a profound impact. Another participant, an older man named George, spoke about his struggle to reconcile his faith with the suffering he saw in the world. "It's hard not to feel discouraged," he admitted. "I want to believe that love is stronger than fear, but sometimes it feels like the fear is winning." His vulnerability opened the door for a deeper conversation about the nature of hope. I shared how, during my near-death experience, I had felt the overwhelming power of love even in the face of darkness. "Fear can be loud," I said, "but love is constant. It doesn't need to shout to be strong. It's in the quiet choices we make every day, to be kind, to forgive, to stand for truth." As the evening went on, the conversation shifted from challenges to solutions. People began to share practical ways they were trying to live with more intention, volunteering, starting small groups in their neighborhoods, or simply making time to connect with their families. By the time the night ended, there was a palpable sense of hope and purpose in the room. We weren't just talking about change, we were becoming the change. Outside of these gatherings, I continued to see the ripple effects of this work in the lives of those I encountered. One day, I received an email from a woman named Claire, who had attended one of my talks a few months earlier. She wrote about how the message of connection and discernment had inspired her to reach out to her estranged sister, with whom she hadn't spoken in years. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I kept thinking about what you said, that love is stronger than fear. I decided to try, and to my surprise, she was willing to talk. We're taking it one step at a time, but it feels like a miracle." Claire's story moved me deeply. It was a reminder that the work of love and connection is often quiet and unassuming, but its impact is profound. Each step toward healing, each act of courage, adds to the web of light that holds us all. As these stories accumulated, I felt a growing sense of urgency, not a frantic rush, but a steady call to action. The warnings I had been shown were not abstract, they were unfolding in real time. In the choices we made as individuals and as a collective, the deception of the Antichrist wasn't just about a single figure rising to power. It was about the ways we allow fear, division, and apathy to creep into our lives, blinding us to truth and love. To address this, I began incorporating practical tools into my talks and discussions, ways for people to strengthen their inner light and stay grounded in the face of challenges. These included simple practices like mindfulness, gratitude, and daily acts of kindness. I encourage people to spend time in reflection, to seek out community, and to engage with the world from a place of love rather than fear. One of the most powerful practices I shared was the importance of prayer and meditation, not as a ritual, but as a way to reconnect with the light within. During one session, I led a group in a simple guided meditation, inviting them to close their eyes and focus on their breath. "Imagine a light in your heart," I said, "a light that is infinite and unshakable. Let it grow with each breath, filling you with love and peace. This light is always with you, no matter what." When we finished, a man in the back of the room raised his hand. "I've never done anything like that before," he said, "but for the first time in a long time, I feel calm, like I can handle whatever comes next." His words were a testament to the power of stillness and connection. They reminded me that while the world can feel overwhelming, the light within us is a source of strength and clarity that cannot be extinguished. As I reflected on these moments, I felt a deep gratitude for the journey I was on. The work of preparing hearts and minds was not easy, but it was sacred. It was a way of planting seeds that would grow in ways I might never see, contributing to a tapestry of love and truth that was far greater than myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I no longer feared it. Each conversation, each connection, was a step toward fulfilling the mission I had been given. A mission to bring light to the darkness and to remind others of the infinite power of love. And with every step, I felt the presence of the light beings and the guidance of Jesus. A steady and unwavering force that carried me forward. As my journey unfolded, I began to see how interconnected our lives truly are. The threads of love, compassion, and understanding that I had witnessed in the light were not just abstract concepts. They were the essence of how we are meant to live. Every interaction, no matter how small, had the potential to weave another thread into the great tapestry of connection that binds us all. This realization deepened my commitment to the mission I had been given. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about showing up in each moment with love and authenticity. Trusting that even the smallest acts could create ripples far beyond what I could see. This understanding brought a profound sense of peace, even amidst the challenges I faced. One of the most unexpected outcomes of sharing my story was the way it inspired others to take action in their own lives. People began coming to me not only with questions but also with stories of how they were finding new ways to connect and contribute. Some started small groups in their communities to discuss spirituality and the importance of discernment. Others reached out to estranged family members, mended broken relationships, or volunteered in ways they hadn't considered before. One story in particular stood out to me. A woman named Elena, who had attended one of my talks, reached out to share how my message had changed her perspective. She had been struggling with resentment toward her father, who had abandoned her family when she was a child. For years, she had carried that pain, allowing it to shape her relationships and her sense of self. After hearing my story, Elena decided to write her father a letter, not to condone his actions, but to release the bitterness she had been holding onto. I realized that holding onto the anger was only hurting me. She told me, writing that letter was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was also the most freeing. I feel lighter now, like I've made space for something better. Her words resonated deeply with me. I had seen during my near-death experience how unresolved pain and fear could cloud the light within us. Releasing those burdens wasn't just about finding peace for ourselves. It was about creating space for love and connection to grow. As these stories accumulated, I began to notice a pattern. The people who were most deeply moved by my message were often those who had been searching for something they couldn't quite name, a sense of purpose, a connection to something greater, or simply the reassurance that they weren't alone. My role wasn't to give them answers but to help them recognize the light that was already within them. One evening, I was speaking to a group at a local community center when a teenager named Noah approached me after the session. He was quiet and hesitant, but his eyes held a depth of curiosity and longing. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," I replied, sensing the weight of what he wanted to share. "I've been feeling lost," he admitted, "like I don't know who I am or what I'm supposed to do. Hearing you talk about the light, it makes me wonder if I've been looking in the wrong places." His vulnerability was both heartbreaking and inspiring. I told him about my own journey, how I had spent years caught up in the busyness of life, disconnected from the deeper truths that had always been there. "The light isn't something you have to find," I said gently. "It's already within you. Sometimes it just takes stillness and courage to see it." Noah nodded, his expression thoughtful. As he walked away, I saw a spark of hope in his eyes, a reminder that even the smallest conversations could plant seeds of transformation. These moments of connection became a constant source of inspiration. Each one reinforced the truth I had seen in the light, that we are all part of something greater, and that our choices to act with love and intention contribute to a collective web of healing and growth. The tapestry of connection wasn't something I was creating on my own. It was something we were all weaving together. At the same time, the vision of the Antichrist remained a sobering reminder of the challenges ahead. The deception I had witnessed wasn't just about a single figure or event. It was about the ways fear and division could take root in our lives. blinding us to the truth. Staying vigilant meant more than recognizing external threats. It meant confronting the ways we allowed fear, anger, or apathy to cloud our own hearts. This understanding deepened my commitment to living with intention. I began to see every moment as an opportunity to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and truth over convenience. Whether it was a simple act of kindness, a heartfelt conversation, or a quiet moment of reflection, each choice became a thread in the tapestry. One day, as I was walking through the park that had become my sanctuary, I came across an elderly man sitting alone on a bench. His face was lined with years of experience, and his posture suggested a heaviness that went beyond physical fatigue. I felt an inner nudge to sit beside him. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I said, breaking the silence. He looked at me with a faint smile, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "It is," he replied, his voice soft, "though some days it's hard to see the beauty." I waited, sensing that he had more to share. As we talked, he opened up about the losses he had experienced, the passing of his wife, the growing distance between him and his children, and the loneliness that had become his constant companion. I listened without judgment, simply holding space for his story. By the time we parted ways, his expression had softened, and he thanked me with a sincerity that stayed with me long after. "Sometimes all we need is someone to remind us that we're not alone," he said. His words encapsulated the essence of the mission I had been given. It wasn't about grand revelations or dramatic changes, it was about the quiet, steady work of creating connection, one moment at a time. Each act of love, each conversation, was a way of weaving another thread into the tapestry of light and truth. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a growing sense of purpose. The vision I had been shown was not a burden but a gift, a chance to bring hope, healing, and connection to a world that often felt fractured and uncertain. With each step forward, I trusted that the light I carried was enough to guide me, and that the threads I was weaving would continue to grow, strengthening the tapestry that binds us all. As the mission to share my experience grew, I began to see how each interaction contributed to a larger purpose. The ripple effects of love, connection, and truth were creating a web of light that extended far beyond anything I could measure. It wasn't just the people I spoke to directly, it was their families, friends, and communities, each touched in ways that reflected the infinite potential of love. The light I had been shown wasn't meant to stay within me, it was meant to be shared, multiplied, and woven into the fabric of our collective existence. One of the most powerful realizations I came to was how deeply we all long for connection. Beneath the surface of every conversation, every interaction, was a desire to feel seen, valued, and understood. This longing wasn't a weakness, it was a reflection of the truth I had seen in the light, that we are all interconnected, part of a greater whole, and our purpose is to nurture and strengthen those connections. This understanding transformed the way I approached my mission. It wasn't about convincing people or delivering a message, it was about creating spaces where people could reconnect with themselves, each other, and the light within. These spaces took many forms: small gatherings in homes and community centers, one-on-one conversations in quiet coffee shops, or even brief moments of kindness shared with strangers. One such moment occurred during a visit to a local nursing home. I had been invited to speak with a group of residents, many of whom had been struggling with feelings of isolation and loss. As I shared my story, I could see the impact it had on them, not just the words, but the energy behind them. It was as if the light I carried was reaching out to touch each person, reminding them of their inherent worth and the love that surrounded them, even in difficult times. Afterward, an elderly woman named Margaret approached me. Her eyes glistened with tears as she took my hand. "You reminded me of something I had forgotten," she said softly, "that no matter how alone I feel, I am never truly alone." Her words were a testament to the power of connection. It wasn't the details of my story that mattered most, it was the reminder of the light and love that exists within all of us. Margaret's renewed sense of hope was a thread added to the web of light, one that would continue to strengthen and inspire others. As these connections grew, so did the urgency of the mission. The vision of the Antichrist remained vivid in my mind, a constant reminder of the importance of vigilance and discernment. The deception I had witnessed was insidious, preying on humanity's deepest fears and desires. It wasn't just about one man, it was about a collective vulnerability. A willingness to trade truth for comfort and love for control. To counter this, I focused on empowering others to cultivate their own discernment. I encouraged people to seek truth not in the words of others but in their own hearts. To question what they were told and to trust their inner light. Discernment, I explained, wasn't about suspicion or skepticism, it was about clarity. The ability to see through the illusions that seek to divide and deceive. One of the most common questions I received was, how do we recognize the truth when the world feels so chaotic? My answer was always the same: start with love. Truth and love are inseparable. If something leads you away from love, whether it's fear, anger, or division, it's not the truth. This simple guidance resonated with many, giving them a compass to navigate the complexities of life. It wasn't about finding definitive answers or solving every problem. It was about staying rooted in the light, even when the path ahead was uncertain. As I continued this work, I noticed a transformation not only in others but also in myself. The love and light I had experienced during my near-death experience were no longer just memories, they were a living presence, guiding me in every moment, even in times of doubt or difficulty. I felt the quiet reassurance of the light beings who had accompanied me. Their energy a constant reminder that I was never alone. One particularly challenging moment came when a close friend, someone I had shared my story with early on, confided in me that she was struggling to believe. "I want to trust what you're saying," she admitted, "but it's hard. It's hard to believe in something I can't see." Her honesty touched me deeply. I didn't try to convince her or argue my perspective. Instead, I simply said, "Belief isn't about seeing, it's about feeling. The light is within you. Whether you recognize it or not, trust that it's there, and let it guide you." Over time, I saw her begin to open up, not just to my story but to her own journey of self-discovery. Her doubts didn't disappear overnight, but she began to explore them with curiosity and courage. Watching her transformation was a reminder that the work of love and truth is a process, one that unfolds in its own time. As the web of light continued to grow, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey I was on. The challenges I had faced, the doubts I had overcome, and the connections I had formed were all part of something greater. Each thread in the tapestry, no matter how small, contributed to the strength and beauty of the whole. I also began to see how this work extended beyond individual lives. Communities were coming together, inspired by the message of connection and hope. People who had once been strangers were forming bonds of trust and support, creating networks of love that could withstand the challenges ahead. These communities weren't bound by geography or ideology. They were united by a shared commitment to live with love, integrity, and truth. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on all that had unfolded, I felt a familiar presence. It wasn't a vision or a voice, but a deep sense of connection to the light beings who had guided me. Their message was clear, though unspoken: the work you are doing matters. The web of light is growing. With each passing day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The vision I had been shown wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. A reminder that even in the face of darkness, the light within us is strong enough to guide the way. The tapestry of connection we were weaving together wasn't just a symbol of hope, it was a living force, one that had the power to transform the world. The journey was far from over, but I knew that every step forward brought us closer to the truth, closer to the love that binds us all. And with each thread added to the web of light, I felt the presence of the infinite, a reminder that we are never truly alone. Together, we were creating something beautiful, something eternal, a reflection of the light that resides within us all. As the journey neared what felt like a natural culmination, I realized that the mission I had been entrusted with wasn't about reaching an endpoint. It was about walking a path, step by step, and helping others recognize the light within themselves. The vision I had been shown was not just a cautionary tale but a call to awaken, to see the connections that unite us and the love that sustains us. Even in the face of darkness, the web of light that had been forming through countless conversations, gatherings, and small acts of kindness was no longer just an idea. It was a living reality. Each thread represented a choice, A moment when someone chose love over fear, connection over isolation, or truth over deception. Together, these threads formed a tapestry that was both beautiful and unbreakable, a reflection of the infinite love I had experienced in the presence of Jesus. One of the most profound moments during this time came during a large gathering at a community center. The room was filled with people from all walks of life, young and old. Skeptics and believers, those seeking answers and those simply curious. As I stood before them, I felt the weight of the vision I had been shown, but also the strength of the love that had carried me through. I began by sharing the core of my experience, the overwhelming peace and love I had felt, the warnings of deception and division, and the call to live with intention and connection. But as I spoke, I realized that the most important message I could share wasn't about what I had seen, it was about what each of us carries within. The light I experienced isn't unique to me, I said, my voice steady and calm. It's within all of us. It's the love you feel when you comfort a friend, the truth you recognize in a moment of clarity, the connection you build when you choose to forgive. That light is our guide, our strength, and our purpose. It's what binds us together and reminds us that we are never truly alone. As I looked around the room, I saw the truth of those words reflected in the faces of the people before me. Some were moved to tears. Others sat in quiet contemplation, and a few nodded as if they were hearing something they had always known but hadn't yet put into words. After the session, a young woman approached me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Do you really believe we can make a difference?" she asked. "That our small actions can push back against all the darkness in the world?" I smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I don't just believe it, I've seen it," I said. "Every act of love, no matter how small, adds to the web of light. And that light is stronger than anything that seeks to overshadow it." Her question stayed with me, not because I doubted the answer but because it encapsulated what so many people were feeling, a desire to believe, to hope, and to make a difference. Even when the challenges seemed overwhelming, it reminded me that the mission wasn't about grand solutions or instant transformations. It was about the quiet, steady work of choosing love, moment by moment. As I continued to share my story, I began to see how the ripple effects of this work extended far beyond what I could measure. People who had attended my talks were starting their own conversations, creating their own communities, and finding ways to bring light to their corners of the world. Each connection, each choice, added another thread to the tapestry, strengthening the web of light in ways I could never have imagined. One day, I received a letter from a man named Henry who had been deeply impacted by my message. He wrote about how it had inspired him to reconnect with his estranged brother after years of silence. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but I kept thinking about what you said, that love is the only thing strong enough to bridge the gaps we create. We're not perfect, but we're trying, and for the first time in a long time, I feel hope." Henry's letter was a testament to the power of love and connection. It was a reminder that the work we do, no matter how small, has the potential to create ripples far beyond what we can see. Each act of kindness, each moment of courage, contributes to a collective force that can transform the world. As these stories accumulated, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the journey I had been on but for the countless people who had become part of it. The web of light was not something I had created, it was something we were all building together. One thread at a time. In the quiet moments, when I reflected on all that had unfolded, I felt the presence of the light beings who had guided me. Their energy was a constant reminder of the infinite love that surrounds us and the purpose that drives us. Though I could no longer see them, I felt their reassurance in every step I took, a quiet whisper of encouragement that reminded me I was never alone. As I sat in my home one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of gold and pink, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the visions I had seen, the love I had felt, and the mission I had been given were all part of something greater than myself. They were threads in a tapestry that stretched far beyond my understanding, a reflection of the infinite web of connection that binds us all. The journey wasn't over, it never would be, but I had come to understand that the destination wasn't the point. It was the steps we take along the way, the choices we make, and the love we share that truly matter. The light I had seen was not just a guide, it was a promise. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and truth will always prevail. And so, I continued forward, not with certainty but with trust. Trust in the light, trust in the connections we build, and trust in the infinite love that flows through us all. The web of light was growing, and with each new thread, I felt a sense of hope that carried me into the unknown. Knowing that we are never truly alone. Together, we are the light. Together, we are the love that binds the world.